Welcome to Better Sex, where you get the information and inspiration to create and enjoy your best possible sex life. Join your host, sex therapist Jessa Zimmerman, as she brings you expert guests, helpful tips, knowledge, and strategies to improve your intimate relationships. And now, your host, Jessa Zimmerman.
Hey everybody, welcome back. It's another episode of the Better Sex Podcast. This is Jessa. So glad you are here. One of the things that I talk about a lot, that I think about, that matters to me, is doing the best by our kids with sex. I really think the best thing we give our kids is a good relationship with our partner, which involves a sex life, and we have the opportunity to set them up to be sexually fulfilled and happy and healthy people. As adults, we have a lot of influence on that. Part of that is dealing with our own stuff, potentially, around sex, so that we can talk to our kids. Part of that is modeling a really thriving, intimate relationship with our partner. So they grow up with that normalcy, right? And then part of it dives into the topic today. Another place where this sort of overlaps, where it intersects, is how in the world do we deal with our kids around porn, right? The research shows that kids generally discover porn between 8 and 10 years old. This is a reality in our world. And so we need to know how to have conversations about this, hopefully in advance, setting the stage for this stuff so they have some context by the time they find it, but certainly in the moment when it comes up, right? This is going to be a common thing, and it's like a crossroads. We have a real chance to react in ways that are supportive and healthy and connecting and calm and curious and move them forward into a healthy sex life as adults someday, or potentially to shame and freak out and punish and, do things that maybe are going to set them back. So my guest today, Braxton Dutson, he's got the Birds and Beads podcast, and he talks and teaches a lot about kids and porn, from how to start young, not talking about porn, but about sex, and work up into conversations to prepare them for this, to handle this if you've never done it before and it's just showing up now. Anyway, he's got a lot of incredibly valuable information to share about how in the world do we navigate this, this wild west we've got on the internet and our kids when it comes to porn and sex. So hope you get a lot out of it. And before we start the show today, it is sponsored by Intimacy with Ease. It's a method to help otherwise happy couples achieve a sex life that is easy and fun for both of them, so that you can actually just enjoy your sex life with zero stress. For more information, if you want to watch a brief little training video that's available, all of that, go to intimacywithease.com. So, Braxton, thank you so much for being on the show with me.
Thanks so much for having me, Jessa. I'm real excited to be here today.
I'm really thrilled about this topic. I've done a couple different episodes about talking to kids about sex, in general, but I have yet to tackle, and it comes up, right? Kids and porn.
Oh, yeah.
And like this whole new frontier we all live in, and how accessible this is, and what in the world should parents be doing about this. So
yeah, I'm excited to get specific with it. I think a lot of therapists and podcasts will say, like, hey, it's important to talk about sex and bring this up and bring it up more than once. And that I love that that's getting out there.
Yeah.
But when we get more specific, I think I'm excited to get just specific to pornography.
Yeah. So how do you define pornography? That, like, there's, it's the old age thing. Anything I'm not comfortable with must be porn, right?
I'm so glad that we're starting off with this, because the first thing that, even as we started talking about pornography, you, your listeners, me, we all have our own interpretation of what pornography is. So everyone's like, oh, we're talking about porn. That thing that's in my mind right now.
Right.
Of what my experiences or what I think it is. So I love that we're going to define it first, because a lot of times we can be talking about pornography just like as we're talking about sex on other levels. And you can be thinking of something and I could be thinking something completely different.
Yeah.
So when we're talking about pornography, and what I will be talking about when it comes to pornography today is anything that the intent is for sexual arousal and gratification in that way. Like that's what the formation is. So to take things into context, there are art forms and different things that people have created specific to art that may or may not have been for the intent to titillate or to excite sexually. Whether they do or not, that's all up to the interpretation of the person.
Right.
So a lot of things could be considered pornography depending on the person that's viewing it. But as we're talking about it, I'll be talking about it in the sense of anything that someone may be using. And most of what we're going to be talking about with teens and pornography is visual stimulation from either videos, imagery, or maybe even erotic novels, things along those lines that is used in efforts to be able to arouse and possibly achieve orgasm.
Okay. And is there any distinction that's important to make between erotica and pornography for this conversation? Because it sounds like, wow, anything that's meant to, like those could be, I don't know, people might lump those differently. Is there, is that just a value judgment? Do we need to distinguish between those things for this talk?
And I think more than distinguish between them, the main thing you just brought up that's really important is that everyone is going to interpret it differently. And the main thing we don't want to do is start the conversation off with, I don't want to look at pornography. Braxton just put such a massive, broad topic and term on pornography. So now everything is pornography. And if someone's more religious, they may start going into the, oh no, I'm sinning. And Braxton just talked about, if I feel excited about anything that's a sin.
Right.
And I don't want us to go in that direction, but I want us to know that pornography is very broad in the topic. We're going to be talking about naked people in sexual acts, on images, and when you're reading something particularly explicit.
Right. So really what people might think of as erotica, which is somehow okay. I mean, still sexually arousing imagery, and then somewhere it crosses some line into pornography, which maybe isn't okay. It's more extreme. Like, it doesn't really matter, right? We're just talking about using these materials for arousal.
Yeah, and the majority of the time as we're talking about pornography, we're talking about values. So moving into the value system of this. So I'm in Salt Lake City, Utah, and the majority of the clientele I work with either have been, or are surrounded by a very popular religious group that's more orthodox, LDS Church, as well as we have individuals from Judaism and Catholicism here. And so having Catholics, Jews, and the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saint members, all three of those are pretty high on the Orthodox level. If you're looking at it on Orthodox, there's a specific way to talk. There's a specific way to live the religion. And those are particularly specific in sexual expression, sexual acts, and then usually are very clear on masturbation and pornography. So we'll be talking about those types of values, personal values, and I want to be able to differentiate those because we're going to have to merge those together as we talk about teens.
Right. You mean merge what masturbation and pornography use, right?
The values, yeah, right.
Because that too, it's like there, it seems like there's a whole conversation or just about masturbation in general, but then also using materials in order to
absolutely.
Play with it.
And so many people see those merged together already. They say, oh, I looked at pornography, and they don't say I masturbated while looking at pornography. They just hope that everyone assumes that's the case, or hope that they don't.
Right. So or this idea that if somebody's masturbating, could they do that without porn, right? Is that a different kind of conversation? Anyway, wow, there's a lot to get into. So.
Oh, man. So much.
All right, so where do you want to start with this? Where do you want to dive in?
I think starting with the values is a really important one. When I do presentations, and I do a lot of presentations, the parents are asking the most. Okay, so I've got to get my child to not look at pornography and not masturbate. But specific as we're talking pornography, I got to get them to not look at pornography. And the first question I want parents to ask themselves is why? Why are we doing this? For a lot of people, it'll be a religious value, or something they grew up with, or there's a fear that's involved in it. So if it's a religious value, great. I'm not here to shame religion at all when it comes to. So we're looking at it going, okay, you have a religious value. Your religious leaders say this is not appropriate. Keep your kids from this danger. All right. So that's one reason. Are there other reasons? Well, I'm afraid that if they start looking at pornography, they're going to have sex early, and I value chastity until marriage. Great. So now we know a personal value. What other things do you value? Well, I also want my child to be able to be a sexual being, and also I don't want to just floor everything. I don't want them to be, I don't want to chain them to a wall till they're, an adult and then release them. But I want them to be able to grow sexually, but also do that in a safe manner. Awesome. And then maybe there's some fears. If they get a hold of this, what does that mean? And I don't know, and that's scary. So taking into those values, it's really important that we talk about being able to try and merge the values that you have. So say in this example, well, I want my child to be able to get more information sexually than I did growing up because my parents didn't talk about it at all. But my church is saying, don't let them do this. And I really don't want to talk about pornography because what if they get curious and then go do this? So the merge between is what we want to talk about today. And being able to do this, I want to say that parents that step into this realm, I honor you so much because it is not an easy thing to do, right?
Yeah.
And being in that space, being able to take this part on and say, all right, we're going to take this part of our religious values and we're going to take our personal values. We're going to start having conversations about pornography while also avoiding the easy pitfall of controlling and trying to jump into controlling your child, especially when we're talking about teenagers. Have you ever attempted to control a teenager before?
Yeah, I've had 3 of them. So
3 of them.
Yeah.
Maybe you've had better experience than most, but for the most part, it gets pretty sticky to try and control a teen, right?
Yeah, it's like from my perspective, we want to influence. We want to be able to communicate our values in a way that persuades and brings them on board, and not just dictates, or they're just going to rebel.
Absolutely, absolutely. You've almost got to be able to get them so that it's their idea, or that they've had some sort of influence on what the decision's going to be.
Yeah.
I can't tell you how many times I've seen parents go, we're not going to have pornography. We're going to shut down internet stuff in the house, and bingo, we're done. I don't even need to talk about it. Right. We're done. And I can't tell you how many teenagers I've worked with that have been like, yeah, all you have to do is do this, this, and this, and it goes around the firewall.
Right, exactly. Right. The parents have no idea of any of this tech stuff, and the kids are totally on it. But, it also raises the point, if we're talking about trying to control teens or have influence on teens, like, boy, we better have these conversations way before then. Like, to me, we're laying this groundwork of our values and bringing them on board way ahead. So when they get the rebellious teen years, some of this is already sunk in, right? They've already integrated some. Yeah.
Absolutely. And if you've done that and you have a teenager, awesome. If you don't have teenagers and they're going to be teenagers, start it now. If you haven't done this and you're starting fresh and you've got a teenager and you haven't had conversations, the time to start is now.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we got to have those conversations.
All right. So what do these conversations look like? I mean, how early do we start? I mean, probably not kindergarten. As
possible. I encourage starting with infants, just so that you get yourself ready and prepped. It's so much easier to start naming parts of the body and saying penis, vulva, and being able to have this conversation and get rid of your insecurities, because infant doesn't know, and that's okay.
I've never heard that before. What a great idea, to talk to your baby when they have no idea what you're saying, to get used to these words coming out of your mouth. I love that.
Yeah.
So we're not talking about pornography when they're toddlers, right? But we are talking about body parts and function and pleasure. Just like whatever seems relevant to an age.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
For their own sexual development. Yeah.
Yes. The being able to have that, to be able to use words, is going to be an important part in talking about pornography.
Yeah.
So in starting as an infant, you can get those words ready for you. When we start talking about pornography, that will help to aid so that you can say, hey, you're going to see people on the screen where their penis is showing or their vulva is showing, and maybe they're doing things together with those private areas, or however you want to be able to word them. But being able to say those are going to help so much more. It's going to clarify so much for this kid. And I encourage you talking about it roughly around the age of 6, if not a little bit before, in smaller segments. So for a 4-year-old or a 5-year-old that's just getting a tablet, you may not say, hey, there's going to be people that are going to put their penis and vagina, and you can find 2 guys doing this or 2 girls doing that. That's too much information. But you may say, hey, you may find naked people in your iPod. You may find naked people that pop up, or people that are almost not dressed. And if you do see that, I want you to come get me. You may have curiosity. You may not know what that is, and I want to answer those questions. Okay, that sounds good, Mom.
Yeah.
Then they know what to do if something pops up. You just created, hey, this pops up. These things may show up. Come talk to me. You're encouraging the conversation at a young age.
What if, I don't know how common this is, that a 4 or 5-year-old doesn't have access to a tablet. But what if it's a household where technology is not as accessible in the house? Would you also start those should those first conversations happen when they first have access to screen and internet?
Definitely when they have access to screen and internet. I still encourage the conversation because of what we don't have control over. If you're going to a cousin's house, a friend's house, if they're ever out of your sight, then they have the ability and the possibility that someone else has a tablet or a phone, or that someone's already seen this and then is showing kids at school.
Right.
That's very common.
Right. Okay. Good point. So you're starting by talking about they may run into naked people.
Yes.
And bring that up. How does that conversation then evolve as they get a little bit older?
So as they get a little bit older, research and studies are showing that on average, the average age range that a child is first exposed to pornography in the sense of naked people, whether it be an image or in video, is 8 to 10. There's a lot of studies that show 8, 9, and 10. So we're within that range, depending on the study you look at. So really young. And being able to have that start earlier, you can start progressing those a little bit because you're talking to them about their bodies, and then their bodies are starting to change. And then as you get maybe an 8-year-old, a 7 and 8-year-old, they're getting into the school place where kids are starting to then have even more phone access.
What hits me about this is 8 to 10, I'm guessing, is earlier than most people are having the talk. I mean, again, I'm saying, I have these, it's talks, it's over time, but I think a lot of it, parents are probably waiting till they're pubescent, to sort of start to talk about sex. And so these kids are running into this imagery that they've had absolutely no preparation for. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I don't have any research on when parents are doing that, but anecdotally, the parents around here that I've worked with the most, and most parents that report to me, have been 12 years old, 16, and 18. There's magical area. For whatever reason, it's a magical age.
You mean that's when they're sitting down to talk to their kids about something? Yeah. And most of them are going to have been exposed to that, or plenty of them, way before you even going to have that first talk.
Way before. Yeah. 12 because of puberty, which they may have missed by years anyways.
Yeah.
And then 16 because they're driving and typically dating around here in Utah.
Right.
And they're having don't have sex and don't get pregnant. And then 18 is being an adult, and sometimes right before marriage, just depending. But those
or about to head off to college, depending on something like that. Right, leaving the nest.
Absolutely.
Wow.
So the conversation can increase. Again, we went from naked people in your iPod to maybe you're starting to say, hey, you know what? You're going to have friends that are going to come up and show you these things, or you're going to, and maybe you already have you run into naked people on the iPod? You're not going to get in trouble. I just want to know if you have questions. If we can hit curiosity off the bat, we don't have to know everything, but we can respond with what your child tells you. Too often parents think that they've got to know everything before they have these conversations, and curiosity can go a long way in being able to give you the tools that you need to address your specific child.
Yeah.
The other thing I would say that you can do to improve this conversation is you may start getting a little bit more, you let them know more of what they might be running into and how you want them to respond. So, hey, you're going to see this, because it's not an if, it's a when a child is going to run into pornographic material. And when you do see this, I want you to come talk with me. You're not going to be in trouble. I want to answer any questions that you do have, because sometimes it can be confusing on what you see, because you don't know what they're going to run into.
Right.
You don't have to give them specific examples, but really common ones might be that you're going to see someone maybe using their penis in ways that might be confusing to you, or you might see 2 female-bodied individuals doing something that's confusing, or 2 males, or multiple people. When you see something like this, I want you to come talk with me so that I can help answer any of these questions. Is that okay? Like you can bring that in and they can start to have that conversation with you. Being curious with them if they have run into it, like, have you seen anything like that already? And they might be like, well, yeah, tell me what you saw. This is a hard place to be able to like, oh my gosh, you already saw it?
Right. I was going to say, for all, I'm imagining people listening to this, it's like for the ones that didn't start in infancy and have developed like comfort with this, how do you suggest parents, how do they handle that conversation? Or how do they handle their own anxiety level? Because it's one thing to say, you're not going to be in trouble, let me know. But if you're all tense, that's going to come across in your tone of voice, your body language. It's not going to relax the child to be able to really share with you. So how are people maybe getting a later start to this? What do you suggest in terms of managing that?
So I suggest this viewpoint. A while ago, as I work a lot with teenagers and parents, and as I was working with them, I recognized that there's a pattern, and I call them the 3 C's. The 3 C's why your kid's looking at pornography. And going through these 3, I'll go through them real quick and then explain them a little bit more. Okay. But the first C is clicking. I say the word clicking because they're clicking through and boom, something pops up.
Right.
Curious is the second one, out of curiosity. And then the third one is coping.
Okay.
So to start off, clicking. It's been I've heard so many stories, or I've had, someone bring in their child and go, my child's addicted to pornography. Typically, this one is a little bit more younger. Like for one instance, there was a girl that her mom was really worried about because she had found the word tits just in Google, and she's like, "Oh my gosh, what's my daughter doing?" And upon further investigation, she didn't know how to spell tights. She was trying to spell tights, and Google, unfortunately, was like, "Oh, that's what you want to see? Well, here you go."
Yeah, I mean, my daughter, she'll kill me for sharing this, but she had a friend who was really into horses, and they Googled horse breeding. And you can imagine what they came across with, a totally innocent search.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So very, very innocent, clicking, typing in Pokemon or Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, whatever it may be. There's something that's connected to it, and they just may be watching a video on YouTube and it rolls into something more sexual, or they see something on Google. Those things are important to be able to address and go, okay, there could be an accidental exposure, and we still need to talk about that.
Right.
Then we move into curiosity. Evidently, we're teens, kids, very, very curious. And a very common one would be, what do girls' parts look like, or vagina, or boys naked, or whatever it may be.
Right.
They may be curious on what other body parts. Very natural, very normal to experience this curiosity. What is sex? What does sex feel like? Those curiosities and such access to Google. Again, Google throws everything and is not like, oh, you're only 12. You probably want to know this.
Right.
So the curiosity, they may come into it just by being curious on what something sexual is or feels like. And then the third one is coping. And this is the one that I see most common, especially when we're talking about teenagers. A teenager, what's going on in the teenager's life? Are they being bullied at school? Do their parents just go through a divorce? Are they bored at home? What is going on for them that they're trying to cope with? And I often see that pornography coupled with masturbation is typical for someone when they're feeling overwhelmed at school or stressed or going through a big life change, or they've just moved and are not able to, or having a hard time coping with big life changes. And so conceptualizing this, I help parents do this to be able to go, okay, where is my child at right now? So that I don't have to go to the first thought a lot of parents go to is my child's looking at pornography. Pornography's bad. And then people that look at pornography become sex fiends or they're sex addicts. Oh my gosh, do I have a sex addicted child? We want to stop that one.
Getting a little ahead of themselves there, right?
Right?
Yeah.
Because it gets so sensationalized. Sex addiction is very sensationalized right off the bat. That's what we hear all the time on the news and stuff. And so they obviously are going to go to that. And I encourage parents to take a step back and go, what's the context of this? And to get curious with their kids about what is going on for them, so we don't have to jump to the conclusion that wherever our mind's going with this.
It's Jessa here, just taking a quick break. Thanks for listening. Are you interested in being a guest on the show? I'm always looking for people with expertise to share that could enrich other people's sex lives. And I'm also interested in hearing from people who have transformed their own intimate relationship and would want to share their story with my listeners. So if you've got something to contribute to the discussion and want to see about being featured on an upcoming episode, please visit our website, bettersexpodcast.com, and check out the Be a Guest details. You'll find everything you need there.
Kristen Hodson, when she heard about my 3 C's, coupled that with a way that parents can respond to it, and I absolutely love it. So those 3 C's are stay curious, stay connected, and, oh my heavens, some space in it. And stay calm. The number one.
Yeah. So right. This whole thing about stay calm, deep breath. I mean, I assume people don't have to have all the answers or the perfect response in the moment, as long as they stay calm and connected and curious. It's like, we can come back to this, right? It's not the last.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it gives you so much more information. I will keep coming back to this, is that parents often feel, I have to know the answers. My kids looked at pornography. I have to know the answer. You don't. You need to stay calm. You need to stay curious. You need to stay connected. Because what that combo does is, when you stay calm, it's inviting to the children. Right. Like, okay, all right, mom, dad, they're doing okay. Staying curious allows for you to get more information than you're trying to give, so you don't miss anything.
Yeah. Right. And it's way more. It seems to me it's got to be way more about asking questions and listening things and knowing what to say in response. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, you can imagine if you saw your kid looking at a naked image, our assumptions are, oh, they either doing this on purpose, or they must like this, or I don't know. And you may not know at all. And a great question is, what did you feel about that when you saw that? What did that bring up for you? I was confused, or I felt kind of turned on, or the curiosity can help you go down the road that the child's actually on, not what you think that they're on.
Yeah.
And then staying connected. One of the hardest things that, or one of the first things that we'll do, or that I see parents do, is they will start to take things away, or they'll start to inadvertently start to take love away or connection away. Of like, if you're going to do this, then, you're grounded, you're not going to go with the family, or you can't this. They'll start to take away the connection, and that's the time they need connection the most, because they're typically trying to cope with something that is really distressing.
Yeah. So I understand the 3 C's, for the parents, calm, connected, and curious, apply all the time, but is there a different, depending on which C your kid's at, if they click through accidentally, they're curious, or they're coping, how does that escalate in terms of a parental response, or how does that change the way the parent should handle it?
Yeah. So starting with the curiosity, you can find maybe what level you're on with the 3 C's. Mm-hmm. Hey, how did you find this? Oh, I was trying to find tights. Boom. All of a sudden we understand this is an accidental thing. And we're like, oh goodness. And now tell them, and we can start taking over what the child saw and understanding what's going on for them, or if they're curious, or if they're coping. Understanding the clicking versus the curiosity. That curiosity can help with parents, but then being able to go, okay, if it's not clicking, it wasn't accidental, what curiosities do they have, and how can I keep asking, and what information can I give to them? Are there podcasts that they can listen to? Is there a podcast I need to listen to so that I can help give them that information?
Right.
Do you feel comfortable Googling it? The main thing we want to do is help kids feel comfortable having parents be their Google versus Google.
Right. So the parents can be the source of these answers and framing, which also gives them the chance to instill their values, right? To communicate those while they're giving you information. Yeah. Okay.
Even when you get in the curiosity part, as it's escalated from clicking to maybe curiosity, you can say, hey, I really want you, this is a great question. It's a very normal question for you to have. And everybody wants to know this. And so of course you want to know this. Next time, please come and ask me before you do this, because there are ways that I want to give you this information, and Google is going to give you more information than what that may bring up more questions than it does answers, and I want you to be able to get the answers. That's a great way to respond. It normalizes them. It says, hey, you're going to have these. Everyone's got these questions, and this is the way we can go about it next time. That can help with that curiosity. and then still connecting with them afterwards, weeks down the road of like, hey, have you had any other curiosities about this? Or I've been thinking about it. How have things been, when it comes to understanding the opposite sex? Or you can keep following up with them and making them more conversation-like.
Yeah.
And then when we find it going into the coping, you may find that an answer that you ask curiosity-wise, like, what was going on for you when you were watching this? I don't know. Because teens aren't typically taught a lot of their emotional response. And so they really may not be knowing. They might not be trying to push it off to the side of like, I don't want you to talk to me.
Right.
Maybe there's a good chance that there's embarrassment. There's not understanding what's going on for them. They may have been dealing with this for quite some time without you knowing.
Yeah.
Without anybody knowing. And them being like, I'm trying to solve this by myself. And I don't know. Yeah. So they may have an I don't know, and that's okay. We don't need to get angry at the I don't know. We keep being curious. We can even offer some things. How have you been doing at school? How about friendships? Like, have you been feeling lonely? Have you been feeling sad, anxious? Tell me about what life has been. We can move from the pornography into what's going on in your life. And that can be a supportive way that we don't have to focus solely on like, well, why are you looking at pornography? And how long have you been looking at pornography? The temptation is to stick with that because that's right. The easy way to go in trying to find out answers when really we need to find out a little bit deeper what's going on that's driving the pornography.
Right. Yeah. So let me ask you this. What about somebody's got teenagers and let's say they're totally fine with masturbation. They see that as a healthy, it's, as a sex therapist, like I always say, it's totally healthy, totally normal. This is a good thing. Mm-hmm. It can be used for coping or somebody who's, distressed, but a lot of it is healthy. But how can parents who are maybe want to embrace masturbation and sexuality and all this stuff and then support their kids to do that, then talk about what the concerns might be about porn? Like how do people straddle that? What do you know about any sort of risks or harmful effects of seeing this stuff if you're a teenager? If it doesn't cross your values, but it's just like, is this too much for them? And then how do we talk to them about masturbation? But
great question.
Whether it's appropriate to use porn or not, or other materials, right?
Definitely. I love the analogy of I often talk about Fast and the Furious. You know that movie series?
Yeah.
Being able to talk to a teenager about, or talk to a child about the risks of pornography and essentially being able to say, hey, you know what? Masturbation's so normal. Your curiosity in this is very normal. The thing that worries me is that pornography is not a documentary. I love that quote by, oh my gosh, I'm going to forget his name. He wrote the book, Oh, For Goodness Sakes. That's the book. Al Vernacchio.
Okay.
Al Vernacchio is the one that said that, and it's always stuck with me. That he says that porn is not a documentary,
right.
And so that being able to having parents tell their kids this, going, hey, when we go watch Fast and Furious or James Bond or all these really whatever movie they're really into, being able to put that as an analogy and go, do we use that as like for Fast and Furious? Do we watch Fast and Furious and then use that as a driver's educational?
Right. Right.
It's like, no. Well, why don't we? If you watch it, how come we don't go out and do that? Well, it breaks the law and it's dangerous and probably not all that stuff's real. Cars don't flip it, they don't flip over this and that happens. And sure, do all cars do that? Does our Honda Odyssey do burnouts and J-turns? No, it doesn't.
Right.
So it's not showing what driving looks like. It's sensational. It is all for entertainment. And ultimately,
right. It's fantasy and entertainment, right?
It's fantasy, yeah. It's adult entertainment. That's what it's called. And being able to help them understand this is entertainment. If you're looking at this to help you understand how you're supposed to be as a lover, as a partner, as a sexual being, this is not the educational place for you to get that.
Right.
You'll find yourself feeling frustrated with penis size, with breast size, with your labia, with how your body looks, with positions, with what does my partner want? There's a lot of questions that will come up, and you're not going to see the awkwardness that is in with sex. You're not seeing the reality of it. You're seeing what the entertainment piece brings.
But Dad, I'm not doing it for sex ed. I'm just doing it because it's exciting. It's just arousing. It's like, is there any problem with that?
I think that I think that goes back to some of those values that we have, because that's a really good question. Because some parents may be like, yeah, that's totally great. I still push against going, hey, you know what? Even when you're an adult, again, it's adult entertainment. Right now you're under the age of 18. And so we're going to encourage you to not look at pornography. I know I can't control you in not doing that, but we're going to put parental blockers here at the house to make it not as easy to be able to do this, or really prefer that you don't, because we know that it can skew some of the ways that you think about sex.
Right. Whether you think you're blocking against that yourself, you think you understand it's fantasy, but it's still going to inform those pictures in your brain. Especially
for teenagers that are all about, am I supposed to? There's always that question of how do I get to be better? So I love that question, because they might be like, it's nothing, Dad.
Right.
But being able to say, well, we're still, just because we're sex positive in this and we're not super concerned about pornography, but we don't want that in the house right now, especially for a younger brain. That's absolutely an appropriate comment to be able to let them know, like, yeah, and it's for adults, and we're not doing the adult entertainment thing for you. You can masturbate all you want and use, your fantasies and things like that. We highly encourage that. That's great. But we're not going to have you just go to pornography.
Yeah. All right. So this leads into my last question about how do parents stop it, right? If your teen or whatever is looking at, it's probably easier with children, younger children, but how do people block access to this? I mean, you can't control the whole world, but at least within your home or within the devices you control.
Yeah, so you've got there's different parental blockers that you can use. The main thing, like I encourage parental blockers. I think they can be great, especially to curb the curiosity and the clicking, as well as the coping. But it is not a end all be all, which means don't let parental blockers block parental conversations.
Okay.
That's the number one thing I see parents go, we got parental blockers, don't have to talk to them about it.
Right.
You need to talk about it still.
Yeah.
And so having the conversation, there's different things that you can do. So I've heard of one that's been quite popular coming through here in Utah, which is called Covenant Eyes, that essentially it's one that it doesn't block the pornography, but what it does is it will give a report to whoever's in charge, whoever it is. You can deem that to be a buddy, a parent, but when something's deemed pornographic, it takes account of what's going on and then sends it to the parent, so and you can have a conversation. The scary part about this one is it can be really, really shameful, where they're looking at pornography. You're like, hey, I see that you went and saw blah 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 blah. Like, remember, you're like diving into your child's sexual expression and erotic, and we don't want to shame that or hurt that. So if people are using that, it's like, let's use it with great power comes great responsibility. Let's be really responsible with using something that would report back to you. There's also ones that will cut things out. Some parents have gone as far as not having search engines at their house. So essentially you'd have to know the exact URL to be able to get onto a website. So then they have a list of their URLs that the children need, like the schooling or whatever it may be.
Right.
But they don't have searching ones, or they've got Google for Kids or something that is a little bit more like, hey, this looks like it's sexual. You probably shouldn't do this. So there's options to it, but keep having those conversations about why we have the blockers and what you're hoping to help them gain. And then have conversations of what you want their sexual life to be. Envision your child as a 26-year-old, as a 38-year-old. What kind of sexual relationship do you hope that they have? So instead of just focusing on what I don't want you to engage in, focus on what you want them to feel as they get older, and to be able to engage with other people. It can be kind of hard understanding that, hey, if you're looking at pornography right now, doesn't have to be a big problem, but at the same time, know that looking at pornography is not as difficult. You don't have to be as vulnerable. Like, it can be really appeasing here. And in a relationship, you're going to be vulnerable. You're going to be naked with someone. You've got to talk to them and find out what they like, and you tell what you like. There's a lot more to it. And that skill is really important too.
Yeah. Good point. So where do people find you? Learn more about you, talk about your podcast,
Yeah, so you can find me, Birds and Bees Podcast. That's on all the podcast sites. You just have to go search that, Birds and Bees Podcast. You can catch me on Facebook, Instagram, Birds and Bees You can look me up, Birds and Bees, on Instagram. Facebook, look me up, Braxton Dutson. If you have questions or comments, or you'd like to reach out with a story or a question, you can email me at birdsandbeespodcast@gmail.com. I check my email there, and would love to connect with all of you.
Great. I'll put all those links in the show notes too, so people have that access.
Wonderful.
Thank you so much for taking the time.
Thanks, Jess. I really appreciate you having me on.
You've been listening to Better Sex. Please visit our website, bettersexpodcast.com, for show notes and additional episodes.
And that's a wrap for today. I really hope you enjoyed the episode. If you are enjoying the podcast, if some of this material resonates with you and you would like to make a difference and make sure that this keeps coming out in the world once a week, ongoing, there are a couple things you could do to show your appreciation. The first would be to go to iTunes and rate and review the show. That really helps us be found by new listeners when you review the show on iTunes. You can find a link at bettersexpodcast.com/iTunes. The other thing I want to invite you to consider is becoming a Patreon. For a small monthly pledge, you get some benefits. So for $2 a month, you get advance access to every single episode. For $5 a month, you get a chapter of my upcoming new book. And for $10 a month, I host quarterly get-to-know-you and question-and-answer chats over the web, and you get invited to that. I would love to have your membership in that, become part of the Better Sex family. You can find a link at bettersexpodcast.com/Patreon, which is Patreon. Again, thanks for listening. I'm glad you're here. Feel free to comment, ask questions, get in touch. I'd love to hear from listeners. Thanks.